We are live with Musicians and Makers podcast. We are dedicated to serving all musicians and artists across a broad spectrum of genres and mediums. I'm here with my host, Steve.
Howdy do.
Howdy do. As well as Lyra Carmer.
Hello.
Hello. And you've just heard Lyra Carmer perform Agustin Barrios Mangore's Mazurka Appassionata. And did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, you got it perfect.
That is awesome. Yeah, that's it's a beautiful song. And what is the significance of that song to you?
It's probably one of the oldest classical in my repertoire. It was songs of musical lushness as I was coming from playing heavy metal and black metal, where it's very dark and just heavy. This was lush and light and airy, and there's just so much to it. It's got my favorite pieces still today.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, you actually just hit on one of the things I was hoping we'd talk about. You have like a background in heavy metal, and that's super cool. What are some of your favorite artists in that spectrum?
Okay, so for black metal, it would have to be Burzum. I really like my first wave black metal. And then death metal, Lamb of God, but there's also this technical band called Wretched, and their guitarists are just phenomenal, out of this world good. And that is sort of what drew me into that side of music, is the quality of the musicianship and the guitarists is just incredible.
Yeah, I saw those spider techniques on your website. And for our listeners, that's lyracarmerguitar.com. And that's all I could think of before I saw that you were into black metal. I was like, this is what this is for, you know?
Oh, yeah. And yeah, some of those, like the whole idea started with electric guitar, and it was a kind of like an exercise that I used to do when I was just getting comfortable with technical death metal. And then it still works for classical too, which is really cool.
Definitely. And, you have such a wonderful story, and I feel like we're not doing it any justice unless we just kind of start from the beginning. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you come from?
Yeah. So I'm a transgender woman from the Oregon coast. I was born in Denver, and then I moved out to Portland when I was a teenager and lived there for about 10 years. And that's where a lot of my musical interactions started. And it became my new home. And then I got married and moved out to the coast a few years ago. And it is just a lush paradise out here. It's so gorgeous. Music at first for me was not so much something I loved. It was something I very much had to learn to love due to my left hand. And it took a long time for me to get to the point where my relationship with music was one of love. For the first 2 years, it was definitely frustrating and struggling. And then I started finding more and more things I enjoyed. And from there, curiosity just took over. And I just kept learning whatever I could, trying to improve. And took me quite a ways, I'd like to think.
Even in the song we just heard, I listened to this performer, and to think that they played this piece without a disability, and I've been playing guitar for years and years, and I can tell you that you're way above me. It's incredible to see what you've done and what you've overcome, and it's beautiful, and I just love your story and where you came from, and just you've done so much. You have so many different you teach, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you're also you perform. Do you do speeches as well?
I don't do speeches. I've thought about it, but I've never really known how to branch out into that venue. The whole performance thing has also been somewhat equal parts talking gig and music gig. Because there's a lot of stories with these music. All of these men, even though they've been dead for up to 400 years, still have lived rich and incredible lives that you can hear in their music, but knowing them gives it much more shape and character, in my opinion. So that's one of the things that got me interested in talking, but I just still don't know how to pursue it.
Yeah, you've shared some of your favorite artists with us. I'd love for you to speak on those. And also, are those some of the artists that you're performing?
So the artists that I sent you were Franz Liszt, and what was the other one that I said?
I think, Steve, you're probably better at the pronunciation. Kazuhito
Yamashita.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And Giuseppe Verdi and Gustav Mahler.
Oh, yeah. So Kazuhiro Yamashita is a really brilliant example to me, and a lot of his big thing with the guitar was trying to make the world a more beautiful place. And that is an ideal that I hold very, very dear to me. And then Giuseppe Verdi was a really, really cool guy, aside from being one of the greatest opera composers. He really had a troubled relationship with music for the start of his career. After the death of his kids, he didn't want to be a musician until eventually an opera organizer essentially forced him to write a piece of music to a libretto that he presented him. And it was Verdi's first premiere opera. And then he would go on to write some of the most incredible operatic works in music. He changed the way that opera is written and how the orchestra is seated, and just innumerable things. Eventually, in his old age, he went on to just living on his farm, and he ended up building a rest home for retired Italian musicians at the time. And he just used his position as a prominent composer to do a lot of good for the people around him and in his hometown. And then Gustav Mahler has got to be by far my favorite because of his music. He says all of his music is about his relationship with the world, and it's all incredibly, incredibly profound. And it speaks to me in quite a deep way.
He had quite a cult following, and he was a conductor as well.
Yes. He was known for being really hard on orchestras, to the point where he, at multiple points in his career, feared mutiny if he wasn't a complete and total hard ass with them.
Yeah, as I was listening to Yamashita, I couldn't help but think of, and I'm not sure if you're familiar, Takeshi Terauchi.
I don't think so.
So it's a little more progressive. Takeshi Terauchi is a Japanese rock guitarist. He's phenomenal at what he does, and he actually he won an award for one of his songs, the Japan Record Award. It was an arrangement award in, I believe, 1967. And I just, although the style is different, the Japanese style is there, and I just I couldn't help but want to share with you Takeshi Terauchi, and just definitely check it out.
Jot that down. Takeshi Terauchi?
Yeah, he's
T-R-A.
Terauchi. He's known for like some surf type stuff, but he started off like playing in another person's band and decided that wasn't for him. Went on his own way to create with a band by the name of I think it was like Terry and the Bunnies, or maybe he started with Terry and the Blue Jeans, but did like some Beach Boys covers, which he just like completely took them in his own direction, and just every album cover is just him standing as rock and roll as possible with his guitar, like maybe in front of some waves or in front of like a beautiful flower garden, but it's always just like you just see him and you're like, this is a rock god.
I love it. I love it. I'm looking forward to checking them out.
Cool. So Steve had some questions about some of your other interests.
Okay.
Okay. So I know that you come also from a background of baking. What is one of your favorite things to bake?
I'd have to say just traditional sourdough. So old starter, flour, water, yeast, salt. You're good. And it's such a beautiful and delicious thing. It's what got me started baking when I was a teenager, and then I totally turned it into a career.
There's nothing wrong with that. And we have a follow-up question. Can you send us some of your sourdough bread? It won't make the trip, but it's worth the shot.
Don't think so. I don't think so. Not with all that's going on. If we still have the days of one-day shipping, I could do it.
Yeah, understandable.
There's the floor.
So I wanted to also ask, in regards to your creative process, from fully transcribing a full orchestra, how long does it take you start to finish to arrange it into a one classical guitar performance?
It really depends on the work and how determined I am to do it. For instance, I have an arrangement by Mahler of his famous Adagietto, and that one was really quick because it spoke to me. I really found that music dear. I was able to get it done in about 3 weeks. But then there's another movement from the symphony that's taken me years to work on. So it really depends on how determined I am to get through it, and how thick the music is as far as terms of content. And there's also an unfortunate part about having to just accept what the guitar can and cannot do, which is a weird thing.
And currently, that's what you're doing. You're kind of editing through like a backlog of compositions and arrangements for publication on your website, correct? Yeah.
I've got the Adagietto by Mahler, which is going to be one of the first ones to put out. And then I've got a movement from a Chopin sonata and a Bach concerto and a Bach violin sonata. I got a ton of stuff that I just haven't edited down and made all nice and pretty, you know?
So you do the whole thing from beginning to end, the recording, the editing.
Yep.
Oh, that's great. And you also started the Oregon Coast Guitar Society. Could you tell me a little more about that? I know you're kind of on pause with COVID.
Yeah, so with the whole COVID, we can't really meet so well, but it's essentially just a group of guitarists getting together for community discussion and learning performance, getting to know each other, networking. It was an incredible resource when it was going on.
That sounds great. I really hope to see more of that soon. How many members were you? Was it kind of like just informal, or was it like a sign-up type?
It was really informal. It's been hard to get to start, but the whole thing with getting people to come was just being around.
That sounds great. So you had some music recorded for a local radio station. Could you tell me a little more about that?
Yeah, so Radio KYAQ invited me to go record for their Classical Music for Everyone program. And the guy who runs it, Gib Bernhardt, thought, hey, she's been playing classical music in bars since she's got out to the coast. This is classical music for everyone. And he called me, and I went and I recorded a few pieces for him, and it was just a delight. Those people are fantastic.
Awesome. Speaking of arrangements, what's the one arrangement that you can play that you absolutely despise playing?
It would have to be a Mazurka by Chopin. It's opus number 17 of number 4, and it's just got really intense high fret stuff mixed with really tightly timed artificial harmonic stuff, and it makes it really devilishly difficult.
One of my bigger questions has been, why do you make art?
Yeah, the answer I gave, because it's what I do. I can't imagine not. After developing the skill that I have, it seems so integral, like breath. It's everything.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think, Steve?
I got another question for you. All right, so me and Josh come from a background of electric guitars. We have our Yamaha acoustics, but we've never played fingerstyle. We've never touched a classical guitar with nylon strings. Where would you advise people to start off? Like what kind of guitar techniques you can learn for fingerstyle?
If you were starting off for classical guitar, I would suggest starting with a nylon guitar. Like this guy, these nylon strings are very, very gentle on the fingers. And then the biggest thing you want to look into is chord shapes, like your basic chords, your C, your A, your D, E, G. And you want to work on those. And then for your the most important relationship is going to be the one between thumb and index. This is really going to shape a lot of music. And it's what I started with, and I found it to be profoundly useful, and it still consists as the main substance in my technical style. It's just these two.
Are you talking about thumb and index on your fretting or on your picking finger?
For plucking. So the relationship between those two is really important.
Yeah, I'm watching some of your videos and I see the way you play, and it's like you're hitting that bass note so low, but then getting to that high so quickly. It's just that stretch. It's incredible to see that on a classic guitar and to see you perform everything so beautifully.
Thank you. I really have a love for stretches on the guitar. There's some really monstrous pieces out there and composers like Agustin Barrios. He had big hands, and back in his day, guitars were slightly smaller. So you would see pieces where you've got a stretch from the first fret all the way up to the 7th fret on the highest string, and it's ridiculous.
Carpal tunnel just about it.
Do you have any stretching exercises that you do daily or anything?
No, a big part of it is just knowing where your stretch comes from. So we've got two really, really super flexible points on our hand as guitarists. And the first, most important one is between these two fingers. You're going to get the most spread between these two. And then you've got your ring and pinky, and you've got about equal distance between those two. So between that, you can try and mitigate hand position, making sure that either this one's taking the stretch or this one's taking the stretch. And then another one is just where you're just moving out and moving in with the fingers that you want to stretch from.
And Steve, do you have any more questions you'd like to include?
Okay. What is the one dish that you absolutely hate baking? I know we went over your favorite and your best recipe, but what's the one thing you absolutely hate making?
Croissants. They are very, very finicky. You've got to start with a dough that you want to undermix, and then you have to get it flat and let it proof in a cold box, and then you have to roll out butter so that it's very flat and thin. And then you repeatedly fold the butter into the dough. And it gets to the point where if you mishandle the dough or it's a little too wet or you don't have enough flour, it's going to tear and you're going to have a huge buttery mess on your hands. And it's just very frustrating, especially in the summer. Especially in the summer.
Yeah, I've worked at a couple restaurants where like we make cinnamon buns and someone forgets the dough and you just go back like an hour later and you just have this like poof. I can imagine like working with the croissant. I can imagine that's not fun.
No, it's quite horrific.
I know that you said you're teaching lessons. Is there any way that you can teach people online or any interest in reaching out and giving lessons in that regard?
Yes, absolutely. I've been teaching online for the past couple months since it started, and I have Skype, and I could probably figure out Discord or Zoom too. And if anyone's interested in it, they just need to send me a message through my website. We've got really affordable sliding scale rates, and my main interest is just to get people playing guitar. It's so important.
Yeah, it's not the only instrument you play, am I correct?
No, I play essentially every stringed instrument there is.
Yeah, I can't even imagine trying to play violin. I feel like I can't figure out the bow for the life of me. Did that take you a while?
It took me quite a while, but once you really get a handle on like the physics of it and how your body plays into it, it's just super eye-opening. Just to the guitar as well as to every other instrument, with the awareness of how you use your body.
Okay. Have you performed in any music groups or bands or anything like with multiple people involved?
I was involved in a festival orchestra for the Northwest Guitar Festival. And every year they've got an orchestra that comes together for 3 days of rehearsal, and then we have a concert. And it's a total blast. And you get to know really incredible musicians there.
Wow, 3 days. I feel like that's so much to jam into. You must have like the pieces ready to go before you get there?
Yeah, you get emailed the pieces when you register for it. And then you're assumed to have either been proficient at training or rehearsed by the time you get there.
There must be a lot of friends coming together.
Oh, yeah, it's a beautiful thing. It's got to be my favorite part about the festival.
Oh, it sounds wonderful. I'd love to check it out sometime.
Yeah, I'd encourage it.
So, coming from a background, you were self-taught, right? You didn't take any lessons or anything like that? You want to just talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I had about 3 months of lessons when I very first started the guitar. And he showed me basic chords, the key is C major, and then that was it. Stuff going to him. And from there, I started really getting curious about music theory and harmony and things like that. And I fell in love with it, which partially led to classical guitar, but it also led to me going to bookstores and finding all the music theory and history textbooks I could find. And so I would read a lot of those. The biggest one that I read was Harmony by Devoto and Piston, and it was really eye-opening. It really demonstrated to me that music is a nonverbal language in which you have so many options to say what you want to say. And then from there, I ended up having a few random encounters with some wonderful musicians who showed me a lot in the little bit of time that we got to talk to each other. And other than that, it's just been me playing.
Any in particular you'd like to shout out?
Tariq Harb and Jorge Caballero, they are some of the most magnificent musicians I have ever met.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, music is just such a sharing tool, and just for the ones who share it with us and the ones we can express with, that's the beauty of it, and it's just why we're all here. And I think that goes back to why you make music, right? Because it's something we feel and we all feel together. I thank you for your time today. Again, this is Lyra Carmer. You can visit their music at lyracarmerguitar.com to find out more.
And also soundcloud.com/Lyra Carmer you can listen to her music there.
And this has been Musicians and Makers Podcast. We thank you for listening. And you can catch us on our website, musiciansandmakers.com, as well as Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. And as well as this podcast, we'll be posting a performance by Lyra shortly after. So please look out for that, and we'd love to have you view it. And thanks for joining us today.
It was a delight. Thanks for having me.